The revolver shook in her hands, but her voice was iron. "I swear. I'll kill you if I have to." The rancher froze, staring at the woman who had burst into his cabin like a storm. Her eyes were wide, brimming with fear and fury, her hair damp from the cold night air. She looked half-starved, half-crazed, but the steel in her words told him she wasn't bluffing. He kept his hands where she could see them, palms lifted slowly from the wooden table where a lamp flickered low. He had seen threats before: bandits, drunk cowhands, even soldiers with too much whiskey in their veins, but this was different. The way her finger trembled against the trigger told him she wasn't a killer by nature. She was a survivor forced into a corner. "Easy," he said, voice low, gravelly, as if each word cost him. "You pull that trigger, you'll regret it." "Not as much as I'll regret trusting you," she snapped back, and her breath hitched. He studied her in the dim light, the dirt on her cheek, the torn hem of her dress, the hollow cheeks of a woman who had ridden too far, too fast, with too little food. She looked young, though the weight in her eyes was older than any years she might claim. "I don't know who you think I am," he said. "But I've done no harm to you." Her grip on the revolver tightened. "You're with them. I saw the mark on your barn door. That's their sign." His brow furrowed. He thought of the faded brand burned into the wood long before he'd bought the place. A mark left by raiders, years back, when he was away on campaign. He had painted over it once, but time and sun had pulled it back through, faint but visible. To her, it must have looked fresh. "You're wrong," he said, steady. "I've buried too many good men because of that sign. You think I'd ride with the kind who left it?" Her lip quivered, but she didn't lower the gun. He could see the battle inside her, fear clawing at reason. The wind outside howled, rattling the shutters. Somewhere distant, a coyote cried. The sound seemed to stretch the silence between them until it was unbearable. Finally, she shifted, leaning against the doorframe as though her legs could no longer carry her. The revolver remained pointed at his chest. "Why are you here?" he asked. "Because they're hunting me," she whispered. "And I won't let them drag me back." Her words struck him with the weight of recognition. He had known men like that, gang hunters who collected debts in blood, who chased women like cattle and broke them for sport. The memory of his wife, her laughter cut short by men just like those, flickered in his mind. His chest tightened. "You're safe here," he said, though he doubted she would believe him. Her eyes narrowed. "Safe? Don't lie to me." Before he could answer, the faint crack of branches outside made them both freeze. The woman spun toward the sound, cocking the revolver. He reached for the rifle propped against the wall, moving slowly, deliberate, so she could see every inch of the motion. Then the knock of hooves. Low voices. Laughter carried through the night. She stiffened. "They found me." The rancher's jaw clenched. He had been hoping for another quiet night, another bowl of beans eaten in silence, another evening haunted only by his own regrets. But fate had other plans. He checked his rifle, nodded once toward her revolver. "You know how to use that?" Her eyes met his, blazing. "Better than most of them." Shadows moved outside the window. A heavy boot struck the porch step. The first shot came before they could draw a breath. A bullet shattered the glass, spraying shards across the floor. She fired back instantly, the revolver's blast deafening in the small cabin. The rancher dropped to his knee, raising his rifle and sending a round through the doorframe. A man cried out in the dark. The night erupted in chaos, hoofbeats, shouts, the clatter of spurs on wood. Smoke filled the room, acrid and choking. The woman ducked beside the table, reloading with practiced hands. He caught a glimpse of her face, pale and taut, but steady. When the next outlaw charged through the doorway, she met him with a shot that sent him sprawling backward into the dust. The rancher felt a sharp pride bloom in his chest, though he barely knew her name. The gunfire broke as quickly as it had begun. The gang retreated into the night, their curses echoing through the trees. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of the lamp and the woman's ragged breathing. He lowered his rifle, chest heaving. She still held the revolver high, eyes darting between the windows. "They'll be back," she whispered. He nodded. "At dawn. That's how they work. They like to make you wait, make you sweat." Her hand dropped at last, the weapon resting against her thigh. She looked smaller now, more fragile, though the fire in her eyes remained. "They used me," she said suddenly, voice raw. "Dragged me along, made me their bait. I rode with them because I had no choice. And when I fought back, when I ran, they swore they'd find me. Kill me." He said nothing for a long moment. He knew the truth of it. The frontier had no mercy for those who strayed from its cruel games. He looked at her, at the bruises on her wrists, the fear carved into her expression. And he remembered his own losses, the graves he had dug in a stony patch of earth behind the barn. "You're not alone," he said finally. She blinked, as if the words carried more danger than comfort. Then, to his surprise, a sharp laugh escaped her throat, bitter as whiskey. "You don't know me. You don't trust me." "Trust don't come easy out here," he replied. "But I seen the way you shoot. That tells me enough." For the first time, her mouth curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. The tension between them eased a fraction, though the air still hummed with what had just passed. She leaned back against the wall, exhausted, revolver resting in her lap. "You've got no idea what you've let into your house." "Maybe," he said, setting the rifle across his knees. "But it seems you shoot straighter than you talk." She snorted despite herself, shaking her head. For a moment, the cabin felt lighter, though outside the night still waited, heavy with promise of violence. The rancher reached for the lamp, turning the wick lower until the glow softened. The silence between them no longer felt like a noose but something steadier, tentative. He wondered if this stranger would be gone by morning, or if, come dawn, they'd both be forced to stand against whatever storm thundered toward them. The woman tilted her head back, closing her eyes. Her fingers brushed the revolver, as if she couldn't quite let go. Her voice dropped, quiet, almost to herself. "I won't run again." The rancher watched her, the weight of his own ghosts pressing at his shoulders. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone in his fight. And outside, far across the desert, a low whistle rose in the wind, a promise that morning would bring blood. The first light of dawn leaked through the cracks in the shutters, painting thin bars of gold across the cabin floor. The rancher sat at the edge of the table, rifle balanced across his knees, his breathing slow but watchful. The woman hadn't slept either. She stood near the window, revolver clutched tight, eyes fixed on the horizon as if she could will it to stay empty. "They'll come," she said softly, not looking at him. He nodded once. "The question is how many?" Her hands trembled, but not from fear. She had been waiting for this. The night had given her no peace, only the slow burn of dread that turned now into grim resolve. She adjusted the revolver, checked the chambers, then glanced at him. "You don't have to stand with me. They're after me, not you." The rancher leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His eyes carried that steady weight she had seen before, a sorrow forged into steel. "I've run from enough fights. Not this one." Outside, a faint rumble grew, hoofbeats rolling like distant thunder. Dust rose against the morning light, curling into a storm. The woman's throat tightened. She pressed her back to the wall, forcing a slow breath through her nose. He stood, towering beside her, a grim sentinel ready to bleed again for ground already stained with loss. The first rider appeared at the edge of the field, then another, then half a dozen more. They fanned out, circling like wolves. The leader rode at the front, a tall man with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. His laughter carried across the open land, sharp and cruel. The woman stiffened. Recognition cut through her like a blade. She knew that voice. The riders halted just out of range, horses snorting, the glint of rifles catching the sun. The leader raised his hand, and the others fell quiet. "You've got something that belongs to me," he called. "Send her out, and we'll let the rest of you live." The woman's face went pale, but her eyes burned with defiance. "He's lying," she hissed. The rancher raised his rifle, sight steady on the leader's chest. "I figured as much." The gang spread wider, boxing the cabin in. A shot rang out, shattering a corner of the window. Splinters flew past the woman's cheek. She ducked, breath sharp, then fired back. Her bullet cracked through the morning air, striking a rider from his saddle. The horse bolted, dragging the man's body across the dirt. The rancher's rifle roared, each shot measured, deliberate. A man toppled from his horse, clutching his chest. The smell of black powder filled the cabin. The woman reloaded with frantic speed, hands sure despite the tremor of adrenaline. Bullets slammed into the wooden walls, ripping through planks, showering them with dust. A lamp shattered, flames licking briefly before snuffing under the chaos. The rancher grunted as a splinter tore across his arm, but he didn't falter. "Keep low," he barked. She slid across the floor, firing between the boards. Her shot clipped a rider's shoulder, spinning him off his horse. She exhaled sharply, tasting victory bitter on her tongue. Then the leader advanced, calm amid the storm. He dismounted slowly, revolver gleaming. His eyes locked on hers, and the world seemed to narrow. Her breath caught. She knew the scar that cut across his cheek, the crooked grin that once whispered promises now twisted into a snarl. "Hello, darlin'," he said, his voice dripping poison. "Did you really think you could run?" Her blood ran cold. Memories crashed, nights by the fire when she believed his lies, days when his charm hid the cruelty beneath. She had ridden beside him once, blind and desperate, until the chains grew too tight and escape was her only salvation. The rancher saw the fear strike her face, the way her aim faltered. He shifted, covering her flank. "You know him." She swallowed hard. "Too well." The leader raised his gun. "Come back, or watch him die." The cabin seemed to shrink. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She felt the weight of the revolver, the choice pressed against her palm. Run back into hell, or fight. The rancher's voice cut through, firm, steady, unshaken. "You don't owe him your life. End it here." Her hands trembled, but she raised the gun. The leader laughed, stepping closer, daring her. "You won't do it. You never had the heart." Her eyes burned. She saw the faces of the women he'd broken, the men he'd left bleeding in the dirt. She saw her own reflection in every cruelty, a shadow of who she'd been. And she saw the rancher beside her, blood on his sleeve, but standing still, unwilling to abandon her. The revolver cracked. The leader staggered back, shock flashing across his face. He clutched his chest, gasping, then crumpled into the dust. Silence dropped like a hammer. The remaining riders froze, disbelief choking their rage. Then, one by one, they wheeled their horses, retreating in a storm of hooves and curses, leaving their fallen behind. Smoke hung heavy in the air. The woman's arms dropped, the revolver slipping from her grasp. Her knees buckled, and she pressed her palms to her face. The rancher lowered his rifle, stepping slowly to her side. "It's over," he said, though his voice was softer now, almost a question. She shook her head. "It's never over. Not out here." He placed a hand on her shoulder, firm but gentle. "Maybe not. But you made a choice. That matters." Her breath shuddered out. She turned to him, tears streaking through the dust on her face. "I don't even know your name." He gave a weary half-smile. "Doesn't matter much. Not today." She laughed once, sharp and broken, then covered her mouth as if ashamed. But the sound was real, alive, cutting through the silence that followed battle. They stepped outside together. The sun had climbed higher, spilling across the open land. The bodies lay scattered in the dirt, shadows already lengthening over them. Buzzards circled far above. The rancher squinted against the light, his hand still pressed against his wounded arm. She stood beside him, no longer trembling. The fear that had driven her for so long seemed to loosen, replaced by something harder, steadier. She looked at the horizon, where the gang had vanished, then back at him. "I don't want to run anymore," she said. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then don't." For the first time since stepping into his cabin, she lowered her guard entirely. Her hand brushed against his arm, not in fear, but in solidarity. Behind them, the cabin stood scarred but standing, bullet holes marking the walls, glass shattered, smoke still curling faint from the roof. Ahead stretched a land wide and merciless, but in its endless expanse, possibility lingered. The rancher exhaled slowly, as if he had carried too much weight for too long. "Trust is rare," he said, almost to himself. "But maybe it's worth the risk." The woman tilted her face toward the rising sun. For the first time in years, the light felt warm. And though the silence that followed was heavy, it was not empty. It was full of survival, of choice, of the faintest thread of hope. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.